Welcome to Please Me, the award-winning podcast bringing you bold conversations and big clit energy. And welcome to Season 5 of the show. I'm Eve, your host, on a journey from trauma to sexual liberation. Join me and my guests as we dive into conversations around orgasm equality, self-love, body positivity, and essential sexual education. Let's reclaim pleasure and close the orgasm gap, one empowering conversation at a time. Last week, I spoke with Dr. Jen Kennedy about the difference between sensuality and sexuality and how we can use a technique called sensate focus to reignite physical connection. If you haven't listened to this episode, I highly recommend you go back and listen. Did you know that podcasts rely on listener support to keep bringing you the content you love? For the best way to support the show, join me on Patreon for ad-free listening, early releases, bonus episodes, and exclusive content. Fill out my questionnaire on pleaseme.online and leave me your questions so I can answer them on the show. Please Me is for mature audiences. Sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
I know we don't want it, but we don't want it to leave because what we resist persists. So as we put our awareness, which is our consciousness, it actually dissolves it, and then it naturally moves out. Sometimes it takes one round or it may take 3 rounds, but pretty much you've done tapping, you know that the charge goes down. So that's EFT in a nutshell.
Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Sophia Torrini to the show. She is a certified clinical EFT practitioner, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, which I'm going to ask you about. She has a history of personal illness that has led her to a transformation in her own life, and she has found ways to transform her health, basically. And she now shares this as a coach. And so I am so excited to welcome you to the show. And why don't you tell me, first of all, welcome.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor being on your show. And yes, I'm happy to answer any questions that can help your audience. Absolutely.
Yes. And I would, first of all, love to start with hearing your story, because I know that you went from a different career and you transitioned after your own awakening, your health awakening. And I'd love to hear your story.
Just like everybody else, I worked in the corporate world, highly stressed. And I want to emphasize, when we're highly stressed and in survival, we make the wrong decisions, which is key. So during working in the medical field, I had some physical symptoms. And even though I vocalized knowing that what they said I had didn't match the persona or the age group that it should happen, I was discredited because I wasn't a physician. And to make a long story short, I ended up with an unnecessary surgery that actually almost cost my life. And I was not expected to live, and most of my organs shut down. At the time, I had no awareness of how the mind and body works. So to make a long story short, now I end up 14 years, close to 16, of having physical debilitating symptoms. And so I always had the same question. Someone super healthy who ate healthy, worked out, to overnight being expected to die and all their organs shutting down. And so I started exploring, and I found alternative modalities. And the most effective one, because I tried them all, and not one session, 30 or 40 sessions of each for each modality. The most effective one for me was emotional freedom techniques, and I will explain what it is, with the principles of meta consciousness, and I'll explain that as well, and the teachings of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And eventually, over a period of 18 months, I healed. And I decided I could no longer be in the health field. So let's discuss what emotional freedom techniques is. So
Yes, let's talk about that.
clinical EFT is evidence-based EFT, and it's a combination of cognitive psychotherapy with tapping on the acupressure or meridian points, basically acupuncture without needles. And what it's believed that emotional patterns get energetically stuck in the body. We know that from Chinese medicine. And by physically tapping and saying certain sentences, that energy moves. And the client during the session actually feels the energy moves. So emotions are bodily sensations that need to be felt. And if we don't feel them, they get stored in the body and eventually they create disease. And why is that important? Because we have the limbic brain. So we have three parts of the brain. So the limbic brain is the emotional brain. And every time we have an emotion, chemistry gets produced. And if we don't feel that emotion, because emotion is energy in motion and carries information, it gets stored. So all our traumas that we haven't felt get physically stored in the body. And where do they most of the time get stored? In your first three energy centers, which is your first three chakras. And where do they live? In your pelvic floor. And that's why a lot of women do not feel comfortable in that area. So all your trauma, most of it is stored down there. And what is meta consciousness? It's based on German new medicine, and it's the biological cause of disease. So when you have a very traumatic event that you cannot handle, a program gets activated in the body because the body is trying to survive. And then in the healing phase, which is when the symptoms flare up, people get so afraid of the physical symptoms, but that's the body detoxifying. And that's when they keep on going to the doctor and doing stuff like that. And I'm not suggesting you don't go to the doctor, but I suggest that you explore what is the body giving you a message here. And what happens is they never heal the trauma or this unexpected event that needs to be healed. And it remains stored in the body. So constant flare ups happen. And that's how we get chronic disease. And that was my case because I never fully processed this traumatic thing that I was cut open from my chest all the way down to my pubic area and all the other things that took place telling me that I'm not going to live. Every morning, you need to make plans who's going to be here for your funeral and your belongings. So that's an interesting component. And of course, we have the teachings of Dr. Joe Dispenza that pretty much tells us your thoughts and emotions create your reality, which is the truth. And in order to change, we have to change. The world doesn't change because we want it to change. So we have to harness our emotions first in order to harness our thoughts. Most people think you just harness your thought and the emotions, but it's actually the other way around. So that's everything in a nutshell. And that changed my life. And it gets uglier before it gets better. But it's a relief to know that I don't have to take so many pills anymore. The amount of pills and the amount of stress and the symptoms and the side effects, which are not side effects, they're direct effects from these meds, was a nightmare.
I can imagine. You mentioned that emotions can get stuck in our bodies and cause disease. And actually, Leslie Draffin was on the show. She's actually right here, right behind me. And she was on the show a few seasons ago, and she talked about having trauma that was stuck in her pelvic floor area. And when she did some womb healing, she actually heard a voice come to her consciousness, and it was a voice of somebody that had raped her. And she actually had to heal from that trauma that had been stuck inside of her. And so I find it super interesting that if we are not dealing with our traumatic experiences, they will get trapped in our bodies. And I find that super fascinating. And also, a positive thing, because if you know this, then you can heal from it. And I found actually EFT through a book that I was reading, and it was about becoming better in front of an audience, just for speakers, right? And she gave the example of using it to heal her hair pulling that she was doing. She was self harming, and she had been hair pulling her whole life. And when she discovered EFT, she used it for hair pulling, and it allowed her to finally get rid of that habit that had been following her for so many years. And the reason why that was so powerful to me was because my daughter hair pulls. So I introduced the technique to my daughter, and within 2 weeks, she had stopped pulling her hair, and she's been doing this for multiple years now. So it's a very powerful tool. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what exactly EFT is and how we can use it to heal ourselves.
Okay, so EFT and these stories that you said are wonderful. So EFT works, first of all, much faster than psychotherapy. And let's address why actually psychotherapy may take longer. First of all, the emotion is not fully felt. And I do EFT a little bit differently, and I'll address that in a second. But the key here is when you're tapping, the body automatically, after a short period of time, changes brainwaves. So there can't be a tiger behind me, or the stress factor, or the threat, or the worry. So it calms the system down. And why is that important? Because all disease exists when we're in beta brainwaves and the sympathetic nervous system has been activated. So EFT activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. And the importance is to feel the emotion, because that's chemical information. And unless we feel it, and it usually goes up or it goes down or it moves out of the body. And I'm sure you've experienced some bodily sensation or some tightness or whatever the sensation was. And or crying or yawning, which is an indication that energy is released. And in therapy, we keep on talking about the problem, and what fires together wires together. So this is very based on neuroscience. So we want to prune those traumatic connections. And I want to address something, because a lot of people are going to be concerned. In EFT, you don't go back to relive the experience. We don't want to re-traumatize. Actually, we do the opposite of therapy. All we do is we connect of your version of yourself that had that experience, and we ask what the younger self is feeling and what is the belief. And we're only tapping on the emotion and the belief. We're not tapping on a description. This guy raped me. We don't want to go there. We don't want to re-traumatize, which is the effectiveness of EFT. There are 300 studies, and it has shown that EFT downregulates 6 stress markers, and one of them is cortisol. And they use it for veterans, for PTSD, and it's highly effective. From my experience, because I've tried EMDR, I've tried all the other stuff, it's the fastest one. And the comment that you made with the person you interviewed, that she heard a voice, that is what we call a cognitive shift. Sometimes people see visions. I've had clients during the session have a vision, or memories pop up, or a voice come, and that is the body trying to release and heal that trauma. And the good news is, after the session, all that trauma is gone, because you don't leave the session exhausted. But what happens in therapy, and I'm not putting therapy down, but I'm just saying the difference is, yeah, you're happy for an hour, and then 2 hours later, you're back at where you are. So I add an extra step in EFT, that a lot of practitioners, actually most practitioners don't. I have them breathe in the belly. So when the diaphragm gets activated, the person feels safe and the body feels safe. So subconscious beliefs are not going to show up when you're not feeling safe. So the act of breathing, which is why the Buddha is portrayed with a big belly, not because he's fat, it's a sign of abdominal breathing. So we want, especially that pelvic floor, to have the breath. And breath is also awareness. And then we want to put the attention on where the symptom is without wanting it to leave. It will leave. I know we don't want it, but we don't want it to leave because what we resist persists. So as we put our awareness, which is our consciousness, it actually dissolves it. And then it naturally moves out. Sometimes it takes one round or it may take 3 rounds, but pretty much you've done tapping, you know that the charge goes down. So that's EFT in a nutshell. So this energy is coiled in the organ. Now let's take an example. So the liver is known to hold anger. Digestive issues, I can't digest what's happening in my reality. So we end up having digestive issues. If it's constipation, I can't let it go. I can't let it go. Diarrhea, I don't want this in my body. I can't digest it. I'm going to push it out. So you constantly keep on running. Pneumonia, you're feeling powerless. I can't breathe. I'm so powerless. So there's a biological, and kidneys are usually almost fear, always fear.
Fear. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
The heart is a heartache, and the lungs are grief.
Makes sense. A lot of it makes sense. And what do we do when we are not dealing with our emotional baggage, right? Where we're causing disease in our bodies. I'm curious to know about the meta health consciousness. Let's talk about that a little bit more. How could knowing about this and using these techniques help our sex lives? Because that's what this show is all about, right? And we want to talk about, let's talk about our sex lives and how all of this can help.
So when we have physical pain in our sexual area, it's emotions not being felt. Okay, so it could be someone has raped us or someone has done something inappropriate. I just had a client that has a weird, I don't remember the name of the condition, but I looked it up. Weird, terrible symptoms and boils in her private area, which actually she was disgusted. And so she felt shame. And it turned out, I looked it up and I asked her to do a timeline. It was related to an incident that happened to her when she was 10. So she had it in the private area, but she had it in other areas of her face as well. After the session, she had a 50% reduction of the symptoms. We need to work on it more, obviously. But it was related that something was done in childhood that she did not know how to process. So as a result, it has prevented her to be open in her life in that and do other stuff. And that's been a very big challenge for her.
Yes, I can't imagine trying to be intimate when you have boils in your genital area. That is already going to cause extreme pain. You really can't have sexual relationships if you have boils or any kind of problem like that. What can you do for something like that? How can you heal? The skin needs to be intact, right? And yes, there are other things that you can do to awaken your sexual response, and you can touch yourself and you can feel sensuality in other respects. But if you want genital stimulation, you need to have healthy skin.
Absolutely. So what do we do is usually if the person works with me, but other practitioners do this if they're trained, is they give me the symptoms of the condition and I look it up in meta consciousness. And I have the foundational course. I'm not an expert, but I've taken a few of the courses. And then it gives me what emotion is related to it, what kind of pattern may be related. And then I go back to the client and we try to find memories. They give me a timeline where the theme comes up. And a lot of times the client tells me, but the first time it happened is when I was 19, which was the case here for another condition that a client had. And I kept on saying it can't be at 19. It turned out it started at 5. So we don't have symptoms during the stress phase. That is something that goes contrary to medicine. We have the symptoms, and I'll explain why. Once there's a resolution, the resolution could be negative or positive. In the stress phase, the body is doing everything. It was designed originally if a tiger was chasing us. The system has not been updated. And the symptoms comes when there's what we call a resolution. So the stress was going on through her childhood and later, and then when she left home, that's when all the symptoms happens. For example, Dr. Hammer, who lost his son, got prostate cancer, and he finally mapped it up. The symptoms started 3 or 6 months after the son died, and he accepted now it was gone. And that's when he got the full-blown symptoms of prostate cancer. And then he healed it with this principle.
So really thinking about looking back at your life and seeing where traumas happen, because these things can get stuck in our bodies and cause disease. And stress is a precursor to all disease.
Absolutely.
And so is inflammation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on diminishing inflammation, because it sounds like the technique that you used on the one client, you said you had a 50% decrease in her symptoms. And I'm assuming that the inflammatory process was diminished. And that's something that, yeah, you want to just jump into?
Yeah, so I want to repeat what I said before. So she was attacking constantly her symptoms, and because they looked ugly, there was cuts, there was stuff with it. And so we had to do a shifting to explain to her, your body is trying to heal. It's trying to bring out this toxic energy. And she saw it as the body attacking her. Because really what the body is doing when it's inflamed is trying to push out the toxins. So when she wasn't attacking and now there was the emotional charge release, the body said, I can calm down, I can let it go. And I'm sure if we do, once we do 2 more 3 sessions, because she's a new client, this will be completely healed. I'll give you another example on an case. I had a lady who came with Tourette's. So Tourette is you do these physical jerks, and sometimes person gets angry and they start cussing out of control. And she said it started at 4. And I said, no, don't think it started at 4. So I decided to do what we call a birth reimprint. On the first trimester, she had a memory flash. So I had her go being inside the womb, trying to experience, she's like a little embryo the first trimester. She physically gets an image where her father is slamming the mother's head on the crib. And so what was happening to the mother was pushed down and slammed. So the embryo was getting moved. And it explains also why she hated her father. She was so angry at her father. I'm going to tell you, after 7 sessions, the Tourette's was gone.
Wow. I've never heard of curing Tourette's, but that's so powerful, very powerful. And it's unbelievable that an embryo that is not even outside of the body can have any kind of consciousness. Can you jump in?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So through the umbilical cord, once the mother is pregnant, the child, or the embryo, I should say, feels what's in the external world through the mother. And that's how it is. And a lot of stuff, I know I came into this lifetime with a lot of fear because my mother was experiencing a lot of fear. And there's a reason why that happens besides it goes through the fluid. It's in order to prepare the embryo to have the best, or the baby that's going to come out, the best circumstances of survival for that environment. And that's how I came out. And I was not aware of it till later on that I was older and I started working on myself. I didn't have any paranoid fears, which was very good. But then later on, it got triggered. So we get the pattern, and then something has to trigger the pattern, and then it gets activated. But you've got the programming for it. And there's a reason why we get programmed our 7 years. And I'd like to address it so people don't think this is woo-woo, because I want to base everything on science. So when a baby is born, they're in delta brain waves, which is why they sleep all the time. You have had a child the first 6 months, they're always sleeping, though. And then they go to alpha and theta. Theta is imagination. So alpha and theta, and sometimes delta brainwaves, where the body is asleep and the mind is awake. We use that in hypnosis to hypnotize people, which is why we get programmed with all these limiting beliefs. Oh, you're not good enough. You're not skinny as Twiggy. You don't have that kind of look for a man to like you, or whatever it is. And that's how old programming happens. And there is no cognitive awareness yet, because beta brainwaves don't start till after 7 to 13. I like to extend it. Everybody says 7, but I think it's dependent on the upbringing of the person. And you don't have that cognitive shift or the cognitive awareness, the consciousness to make decisions. And it also explains why all of a sudden, when you're at 13 and a teenager, you're being so difficult, because you're getting all these conflicting ideas now. Now your consciousness has been activated and you're criticizing and you're judging. And that's what's really happening. And Jesuits took children and they kept them, give me a child for the first 7 years, and they got them fully trained to what they wanted them to be.
So
And that,
every 7 years, you're saying, is a shift?
no, the first 7 years for the child.
The first 7 years. Got it. Yes. Very formative years. Absolutely. Yeah. So it looks like we're running into sort of the end, and I want to make sure that we get into our role play.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's going to be a lot of fun. So we decided that I'm going to pretend to have a chronic illness, and you're going to help me to try and heal from this chronic illness. Okay.
And what are your symptoms?
Okay. So and action. Hello, Sophia. I'm so excited to be with you today. I really need some help with some issues that I'm having. I have been having really painful sex, and I have a desire to be intimate with my partner. However, every time we try to have relations, I am having just so much pain. And sometimes the pain follows me for days.
Okay. It's very understandable, and having so much pain makes it very uncomfortable to feel comfortable in your body and be intimate with your partner. And I'm going to ask you some strange questions. Has there, within the last few weeks, has there been any difficulty or judgments toward your partner? Maybe communication issues where you're not feeling supported? Or is it that sex is not something you always feel comfortable?
Because of the pain, I sometimes am afraid to go in that direction. And do I feel resentment towards my partner about that? No, I wouldn't say that, but I do feel like I sometimes want more physical touch. That's not necessarily sexual touch. And I have a hard time verbalizing that to my partner.
Okay. And what if your body was basically giving you through pain emotions that you haven't felt? Because that's what all physical pain is. And perhaps standing in your own power or even showing him what you would like, or even you taking a proactive role and instead of having intercourse or penetration, you actually use physical touch on him. Sometimes with men, we have to show them what it is that we like. So you rub his head, you rub his hands or between his eyes, and then some other areas, and then start getting comfortable. And that way you're going to feel fully supported, assuming you've explored that there's no other communication challenges that you have or any other resentments, because the body is going to naturally shut down if you do not feel fully respected for who you are. So the body is doing for you what you're not doing for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I really have to look and see if there's any resentment towards my partner. That's going to be a big thing in me healing from this issue as well. It's not just about emotions being maybe stuck, but also current emotions that I may be having towards my partner.
And there's one more area that I would recommend to explore.
Okay.
For your upbringing beliefs or patterns about physical intimacy. Was it that sex was not clean or women shouldn't have sex? Unfortunately, many women like you have had that experience, that they have not felt comfortable inside their pelvic floor, or they feel if they orgasm, it's not ladylike. So I'm not saying it's all you're with the partner. I think there's a component, maybe there's a resentment there or a lack of communication or some area you're not feeling supported. And if there's another issue there going on about beliefs about sex, or maybe you're feeling ugly about your body or whatever it is, that's going to add fuel to the fire. And what the body does is going to give you pain, so you avoid having the intimacy, but at the end you're lacking, in order to protect you to not feel more painful emotions, because it deems that you can't handle them.
Yes. And so all of that you just said brings me to my childhood sexual abuse and how that impacted me sexually throughout the years. And now with this current partner and the painful sex that we're having, I am really trying to get to the bottom of what the issues are for myself so that I can really truly enjoy the process and the intimacy.
We started in great start by bringing awareness with what the connections is. And so the first recommendation I would have for you is heal and re-imprint. So not just heal, re-imprint the childhood unfortunate, very traumatic memory that you shouldn't have had to experience. That is a very challenging thing. And then ask your questions, what it is that I'm getting annoyed, triggered, or what it is, and ensure that you're always feeling safe. Because if you're not going to feel safe with the current partner, he may be outwardly loving at times, but there's an inconsistent behavior. Maybe there's an erratic behavior that triggers you to not feel safe. You won't open up. So your body is actually physically protecting you from doing that. It's not that you have something wrong with you. And that's why it's showing you that area, because that area is very vulnerable based on your previous experience.
That's interesting that it's a protective mechanism. My body's actually protecting itself. And it's amazing how our bodies have the amazing ability to heal themselves and also subconsciously protect themselves. That is very powerful. And I'm going to end scene right there because we could go on and I could tell you all of the other stuff, but we won't get into all of the details because this was just meant to be a role play, but just modeling conversations about how you would speak to somebody about getting help for something like painful sex or any other sexual health condition. And I don't know if that's something that you specifically target in your practice. I personally have a practice called Inspire Health Physical Therapy and Wellness, and I treat sexual health conditions. So, do you want to just jump into how you've helped people in this
Yes.
area?
So I do help in any area of their lives because that's part of, I treat the body as a whole and I look at the symptoms and I don't remember off my head, including herpes is not a virus. I know what medicine says. It's a biological program that has to do with an internal conflict. And so I approach it based on meta consciousness and we go back into the past, we heal it, and we repattern it. So if the repatterning doesn't take place, that may not stick. So we prune the synaptic connection from the trauma, and then in its place, we put in a new memory, more empowering, and as an end result, the body heals. Because the body, as you just said exactly correctly, is there to protect itself because it feels you cannot handle it. And so it doesn't want to give you more grief or more pain or more trauma. So it protects you. And so the body never works against you. And I'd like to make a very daring statement, but I have so much experience about this now. The body can heal anything on its own. It has its own internal mechanism under the right conditions and can physically heal anything. It's there, and then a few months later, it's gone.
So, you mentioned herpes, and herpes is something that, in modern medicine is thought to stay with you forever. It's like the gift that never goes away. And so, you mentioned that it's something that you can actually heal. Are you saying that the virus and the viral load will actually disappear from your blood?
The symptoms will never appear in the body. So German new medicine and metaconsciousness believes in the germ versus terrain. Viruses happen internally. They don't come from the outside world. So we create them internally as a byproduct of what's happening inside us. So the body eliminates those toxins and there's no need to have it activated anymore once true healing takes place. So that's what's happening. It's a very new way of thinking. There's the germ versus terrain started with Bashant in the late 1800s. So it's not something new. It's just medicine decided not to go that way. And it's a more empowering approach for the person because you pretty much can heal. And yes, I've had clients who had herpes and they have nothing.
That's fascinating, really. I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. And everyone listening out there, if you have any condition, even including herpes, you can certainly reach out to Sophia and have her help you. Let me know where my listeners can find you.
Okay. So they come to my website. I offer a complimentary 30-minute consult. I also have a complimentary masterclass that teaches you how to rewire your brain. And I offer many packages. And I also do, so they can come to my website, but I also do intuitive readings when they can't figure out what emotion or pattern is running. So I can help them guide to answer those questions. And with the same handle, Tap Into Your Best Self, you can find me on social media. And I'm hosting a live question and probably a demo on TikTok this Tuesday at 8 p.m. on Coach Amber's platform. And I'm here to help people become better versions of themselves. Having had this experience myself, your body can heal. Your body is not your enemy. And that old toxic trauma is trying to leave your body. So if we can switch our perspective, we can have a new experience in our life. And when you do that and feel comfortable with yourself, you can absolutely enjoy wonderful sex, be fully with your partner, because it's a real gift that we have to be intimate with our partners. It's not
Absolutely.
just sex, it's a gift, it's a loving exchange, and it's a surrender of two energies and two souls coming together that give bliss. And it's a very creative state.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So her website is tapintoyourbestself.com, and you have it there under your name. So I was going to create a banner, but we don't need to do that because it's right there under your name. Tap into your best self. I will also include it in the show notes. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me on pleaseme.online. I would love to hear from you, hear any questions that you may have. And if you love this episode as much as I loved recording it, pick up your phone right now or wherever you're listening and copy and paste and send it to a friend that you think might benefit from listening to this conversation. We all can use healing in our lives. We've all suffered various sorts of traumas in our past that can get stuck in our bodies, and energetically, this can be very beneficial to many people. So again, Sophia, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you having me. And I hope your listeners get the best and they can enjoy their sexual life in a better way.
Absolutely. We all need healing from something, right? But sex is one of those things that can really bring us so much joy, like you said. Again, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Until next time. For ad-free listening, exclusive bonus episodes, Eve's library of archived webinars, and early access to new releases of Please Me, become a monthly supporter on Patreon. Simply open the Patreon app on your phone, search for Please Me, and subscribe today for premium content and more. Cheers to finding your pleasure and big clit energy.